Right now, how do you pronounce your last name?
Kunz.
From the President and CEO of USI0 Rail Association is presenting high-speed rail as the centerpiece of sustainable transportation for America.
Thank you.
Would you prefer the door open or closed?
Probably closed.
Okay.
I'll leave it open so people can come in.
I know we might.
Okay, that's fine too.
I'll leave the witch.
All right, welcome everyone. We started the USI0 Rail Association in 2009 following the president launching the federal program, and we felt that it would be a big need to help organize the industry and support the mission for the country. We're a nonprofit independent trade association, and our members come from the following industries, and we tried to start with a big tent to really get a number of people working together to advance this. We provide several areas where we work, providing a national vision for the country, and I'll show you the detail of the map in a minute. And what we push for in that vision is a 17,000-mile state-of-the-art high-speed rail network, and fast trains, all electric, and this is pretty much the standard around the world. This is not rocket science, it's not new, these have been established in other countries for nearly 50 years, so it's just, what's new is for it to be built in America. We add a voice, for a national voice. We testify in front of Congress, we push Congress, advocate for more funding and a bigger vision for the country. We also work at the state level and the grassroots level, and we also are constantly in the media, always promoting high-speed rail and the solutions that it offers to the country. And we also work at the grassroots level. So it was kind of needed because this is so new and there's a lot of misinformation out there about high-speed rail. I've been on, and I go to all extremes. I've been on Fox and I've been on NPR. So equal opportunity spreading the word. We also put on pretty major conferences. We just finished one literally this week. I just flew in last night from Los Angeles. We had about 250 people, a lot of mayors. We had state legislators, a lot of business leaders from around the world. It was a really good conference. And the reason we went to California because they just passed a statewide high-speed rail plan. They're going to actually lead the country in this. And we're actually, for anyone who's interested, we're having another event here in DC in February. So watch for that. You can get information from our website about that. So the big challenges in America for high-speed rail, because it's new and because we do have a history of rail. However, it's been about 50 years since it's really been a major form of transportation. Here in DC, we're a little more advanced. We have a great metro system. We do have Amtrak in the Northeast Corridor to New York. The entire East Coast is fairly advanced in rail, although nowhere near what Europe and Asia have. And so there's also there's confusion about what high-speed rail is. Is that Amtrak? Is it light rail, whatever? So there's that. There's a well-funded negative campaign against high-speed rail that's been underway for several years, primarily funded by the oil industry, road builders, the airline industry, who don't want to see this built. Or they really see this as a major threat to their profits, and in some respects it is, because when these systems open in other countries, overnight they get 50% of the air market, transferring right over to trains, and then that continues to grow, and there's some corridors in Europe that there are no more planes flying because it's just so much easier and faster to travel by train.
And there's a segment of analysts who say it's not really efficient.
Well, and most of those analysts are actually from some of the conservative think tanks, and if you dig a little deep below the surface, they're all funded by the Koch brothers, Exxon, and people like that. So they just spread lies and myths everywhere they go, and even when you correct them, they continue spreading them. So we've been up against them many times, and so the idea is just to overwhelm them with the true information and how these systems have been proven all over the world, everywhere they're built. The biggest issue is there's a lack of dedicated funding source because it's new. There's not a highway trust fund set up like a high-speed rail trust fund is what we're trying to get Congress to do. And there's a lack of broad support in Congress because Congress is slow to move on anything new. And they receive a lot of money from the oil industry, and so they just try to do things to prevent any change and just keep the status quo. And then the benefits are not necessarily clearly articulated or consistent, even though we do as much as we can. We're actually a small nonprofit, so we don't have millions of dollar budgets like some of the think tanks do. But and then there's long lead time before seeing results. So there's already, people are criticizing the president for, you launch this program, where are the trains? I mean, it takes 5 years to build these systems. And so from the time you launch it to the time you get all the approvals and the funding and the permits and the construction, the time you can actually ride the trains is, the president's already out of the White House. So these challenges all point to the need for an organized PR campaign, and that's what we're working on. We are now in talks with Discovery Channel to do a TV series about high-speed rail, and that's what this is, and you can actually watch a trailer for it. The website is highspeedrail.tv. And then we also have launched this sweepstakes as a way to get the broader people interested, and we're actually going to give away a trip to Europe to go ride the high-speed trains. And that's another website there where you can get information on that. And then the UK actually had the same situation, same think tank, spreading the same myths, and so they launched a big campaign, and it was actually successful. Parliament actually voted to move forward with the second major line all the way up the UK, and part of it was from this campaign that was very effective in changing the negative opinions that were being thrown around. So this is our national map that we launched when we launched the association, and the idea was to show that it could be built in phases and increments, little by little, starting with the biggest cities and connecting the #1 city with the #2 city in each region, and then little by little over a 20-30 year span to connect it out across the entire United States into a network just like the original rail system we built and just like our interstate highway system, which pretty much looks just like this. And the estimated cost of the total build-out is about $600 billion. With a 20-year build-out, that's only $30 billion a year, and we already spend more than on transportation now. So some of what we need to do is begin transitioning the funding that we keep building roads with and start moving that to rail, and instead of expanding more runways and things like that, moving that to rail, because that money actually then decongest the highways and decongest the airports while also providing a new form of transportation, so it's kind of a double bang for the buck. And what we've been advocating for is to get other people involved, such as real estate developers who can build cities at the rail stations, and then that can actually help fund the system, and also for it to be publicly owned infrastructure, and then the option of privately run trains, for-profit trains, such as Virgin in the UK, very profitable, very innovative system. There's now a new for-profit company operating trains in Italy, and so it's really taking off around the world, and the best way is in public infrastructure, we can control it. A lot of people don't know that right now, all the rail lines in America, 99% of them are privately owned by the freight companies. And they don't want to change anything. They don't want a big ramp up of passenger trains. And that's what we want to avoid the second time around, is to have it publicly owned so the public controls it. And then within that, you can have franchises that can run the trains. It could even be airlines running some of the trains. And this system will completely turn around America. It will create millions of jobs. It will enact new manufacturing. It will stimulate economic development in cities. It will open up new job opportunities and living arrangements for people. And so it's really, the benefits are enormous. And there's been a number of studies that have shown the benefits. And then, of course, we hear from the critics that, oh, well, France is, you could fit it inside of Texas, and high-speed rail won't work here because we're a big country and we're spread out and we all are, addicted to our cars and all that. Well, if you look at what's evolved in Europe, this is the high-speed rail system. It now spans about 8 countries, and they're now connecting up some of the missing pieces, such as the border of France and Spain. They're building tunnels there to connect that, and also between France and Italy. And so when you look at this, it's sort of a giant X, as I show there. These are at the same scale now, the Europe and America, and when you put that same X over the United States, you can begin to see how extensive and how far their rail system actually covers. It covers half the United States, and so you do one more of those on the West Coast, and we've got our national system. Just give a quick brief of some of the countries that are building high-speed rail. Spain is spending about $150 billion with the goal of having everybody in their country within 30 miles of a high-speed rail station within the next 10 or 15 years, and they're well on their way. State-of-the-art, fantastic systems. I've been there twice and rode some of them. They go from 0 to 200 miles an hour in 5 minutes, and they stay at 200 miles an hour solid all the way to the other end until they stop. It's not like our Acela here that it speeds up and it slows down, and it's not that a lot of people say Amtrak is incompetent. The problem is that the tracks are not built for high speed. It has to be dedicated precision tracks, and it is expensive to do. But the benefits are enormous, as we can see from all over these other countries. This is the French system, one of the largest in Europe. Spain is actually now catching up to them, but France started in the 80s, and now they have, this is the main form of transportation all over France, is by high-speed train. And it now connects right into London, and it's quickly going to be connecting into Italy and France. It already connects to Germany, Brussels, the Netherlands, and on up north. So it's a proven system. Here's an interesting one. Saudi Arabia is building high-speed rail, and the reason they're doing it is to save oil. That should be a wake-up call for America. And there's, again, when you look at the size of what Saudi Arabia is doing, and it's part of a Middle East network. It's actually going to expand into all the surrounding countries too, but just the Saudi system would cover a third of the United States. China is blowing everybody off the map. They have built already in about 5 years 10,000 miles of high-speed rail. It's the most unbelievable, fast, enormous system anywhere in the world. And you can see that the left picture is the Beijing to Shanghai line. They built it in 4 years, and if you lay it over California, which is the middle picture, it would literally cover almost the entire state. And you lay it over the Northeast Corridor over here, and it would cover from Boston all the way down into the Carolinas. And they built this in 4 years. Now, I know we have a democracy, and we can't just bulldoze houses without any debate about it, but we certainly should be able to build this in 10 or 20 years.
Now, some of that is maglev, isn't it?
No, actually it's not. They have one little tiny maglev system from years ago, and they're not building any more of it. It's too expensive. It uses an enormous amount of energy, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense from an economic standpoint. This is the new system in Italy, and Italy is about the size of California, and this system is almost all completed. And the red trains there is the private operator I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's the chairman of the Ferrari company has actually started his own railroad, purchasing 25 of these brand new trains, and they are literally the state-of-the-art in the world. They will travel at 220 miles an hour throughout the system. They're all electric, and so you can power it all with renewable energy. And the trains have really good food they bring to your seats. They have a cinema on the train. I mean, it's really state-of-the-art and something that we would love to have in this country. This is actually exploding all over the world. All these countries are either in construction or in development of high-speed systems. We're literally, I think, the last country standing that has not invested big in this. And it's really going to come back and bite us in the tail because we use so much oil for our transportation, far more than the whole rest of the world. And as the prices keep creeping up, which they will do forever, America is going to keep getting smacked into these recessions until we start building our way out of having so much dependency on oil. This is the California system. It is now signed into law. It started with a public vote. Then it went to the state legislature, voted in favor of selling the bonds. They got their final approval from Federal Railroad, so they're actually going to start in the middle section, which you may have heard all the critics and the think tanks love to run around saying it's a train to nowhere, which is a lot of nonsense because that is not nowhere, first off. But the idea is that you build the backbone system here, and then you can expand this way and kind of get a competition going. And so it will take a little time to get it all built, but they're well on their way, and that will lead the nation in terms of, and it's a state-of-the-art system just like what Europe has. Texas is also moving forward with a system. The Japanese, it's all privately funded. The Japanese are actually looking at the Dallas to Houston route first, and so that probably will be underway quite soon. There's also, and there it is, compared the first Texas system compared to the first system in France, almost identical. The Orlando system, a lot of people say it's dead, but it's actually not. We just had the governor is the only guy in the entire state who didn't want to see it built, partly because he was also receiving help and funding from the Reason Foundation and others, and it was their mission to just kill these every chance they could. So, but the project, the first phase was on the left here, Tampa to Orlando. It's already ready to go now. They have the median of the highway all set aside, and it's all engineered and ready to go. So we get rid of that governor, that project will move forward. And then that's the full build out of what Florida would look like, and then it'll connect up to Georgia and over to Texas, Louisiana, and become part of the national system. This was a conference we had recently in Chicago, and that's the governor speaking there, that he actually announced a major study to start going forward with a whole 220-mile-an-hour network radiating out from Chicago. University of Illinois is working on that. There's a couple of reports that have come out, just enormous benefits, economic, jobs. So the data's out there. There's no mystery about this. It's proven. It's tested all over the world. It works. This was another study by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, $19 billion per year in new business. The benefits and the results far outweigh the cost of building this, probably by 100 times over.
And that's probably not including the social benefits.
Oh yeah, when and all the way down, environmental, saving energy, saving military spending on chasing oil all over the world. So this was just a comparison of slower trains and faster trains, and which was a better investment. And what this concluded, this was for the UK, that the expensive super high-speed trains are actually a better investment because you can turn more trains per day. There's lower costs of staff, less equipment to buy. So it's a bigger upfront investment. But the trains, and what it shows is once you get above about 150 miles an hour, the systems are actually profitable. Below that, they have to be subsidized forever. So that's a great argument for really doing it right the first time. This is from the International Business Times. America's broken, 5 ways to fix the nation. And the first 2 were a federal infrastructure bank and building high-speed rail. And the federal infrastructure bank would actually help fund it and allow private investment to come into it. I show this slide because a lot of the critics say, oh, well, trains are from the past and we need to move forward and all that. I said, this is not your grandfather's train we're talking about. These are modern, state-of-the-art systems. You can see they even have conference rooms on the train, and I mean, they're just fantastic systems. And like I said, everywhere they're built, they're highly successful. So what we looked at really is what are the main reasons we need to be doing this? And so we try to distill out what are the 5 most serious problems that America faces, and it's bigger here than in any other country in the world. Number 1 at the top of the chart is energy security and energy independence. Second is climate change. Third is mobility paralysis. I just came from Los Angeles, where I mean the traffic congestion there is just epic. You sit, it looks just like that picture on the right most of the time, literally throughout the day, even into the evening. I mean, it's literally paralyzing our entire nation. So which means economic development is also getting paralyzed. And how much time people are wasting going nowhere, and fuel going nowhere is just not sustainable. Then you have the failing economy and job losses and international competitiveness. So we're actually less competitive to a nation that has high-speed rail, and people are moving around quickly and efficiently to meetings while we're spending 3 times as long to get to a meeting. And so it really starts making us slide down on the global scale. And then most of our infrastructure, our roads and airports and everything is already crumbling. The lower right picture was in Minnesota when that bridge just collapsed from overuse and wear and tear. And so so transportation is at the root of all 5 of these problems, and high-speed rail is at the heart of all 5 solutions. So that's the bargain of a century. If you can actually solve 5 incredibly complex solutions with one system, usually you have to do 5 separate things, each billions of dollars. And then a quick look at climate change. I think the superstorm Sandy hitting New York pretty much ended debate about climate change. And as many there have said, the governor and also the mayor have said this. This is obvious. We're having 100-year storms every other year. So we really have to start thinking differently. So what we have to do is move quickly into implementing solutions. 2 parts. One would be to protect our cities and transport systems, and then B would be to actually lower our fossil fuel consumption for transportation. And high-speed rail is the large-scale, comprehensive solution to both climate change and the coming energy crisis. I'll go through these rather quickly because we're running low on time. And so energy security, also known as peak oil, you know, they try to say, oh, well, there's no oil crisis. We have a 100-year supply of natural gas and all this stuff. Well, a lot of that's a lot of PR and nonsense, because it's all going to be extremely expensive and extremely environmentally dangerous to get at all that oil and use it. And then if we have a decade or two of that kind of energy to still use, then what happens when that's over? I mean, and these systems take a decade or two to build, so we need to be way out ahead of the energy crisis and start building these systems now. This is a global energy chart. This is well known. You can actually see in there all the different sources of energy. Well, we're right at the top, and according to most experts, the supplies are going to start tapering off over time, and demand is going straight up. So that, you can see where that's going to lead us. The prices have already skyrocketed and helped drive us into the recession we're in, and as soon as we come out of the recession, then oil prices go up again, and then we get back into a recession again. So it's kind of a never-ending downward spiral until we get out from under this huge oil addiction.
So you think peak oil is passed?
Most experts say it was around 2005 or to the global scale,
yeah.
2005 to 2007, and they say that, you know, it's tapering off. We're not producing a whole lot. A lot of the countries individually have passed their peaks. Saudi Arabia has passed their peak. Venezuela, the North Sea, many of them have already passed their peak. And so when you add it up on an international scale, you cannot keep producing. We use something like 85 million barrels on the global scale. And here you can see America has only 5% of the world's population, yet we consume 25% of the world's energy. 20 million barrels a day, every day in this country. We consume 70% of it for transportation. And then we use 6 times more oil per person than, say, a typical European. And our standard of living, I would argue, is not as high as someone who lives in Paris and has access to all these fast trains all the time. So here's why we use so much more energy. Most of our transportation is either cars or airplanes, and those are the highest consuming forms of transportation. Most of Europe moves around on efficient electric trains. I mean, there are cars there, of course, and planes, but the majority of their people move around, and then here you'll see the different energy consumption per mode is a huge difference. This is in BTUs per passenger mile. Airplanes, 10,384, very high. Automobiles, about a third of that. Buses are a little bit higher because they ride around half empty most of the time. And then look at the number for high-speed trains. There's an enormous difference between moving everybody by high-speed train versus moving them around by airplanes. And then I always like to say, too, it's not only, you know, that we're wasting energy, we're also wasting our time. So here's kind of a fun comparison of an American going on a trip across the top and a European both leaving at the same time going on a trip in Europe. The American is stuck in traffic trying to get to the airport, while the European is taking a train to, a tube to the high-speed station. The American is still stuck in traffic trying to get to the airport, while the European has already boarded the train. Now the American is stuck in the security line at the airport, while the European is already speeding away on the train. And then the American is now stuck on the runway with the delays trying to take off, while the European has already arrived at their destination. And then finally, the American way into the night trying to get home at the other end from the airport, stuck in traffic. And the European's been in a cafe for hours or home with their family or something like that. And this is as true as you can get. I mean, you go out and try to get around America, it's a nightmare. And then this is a very business-friendly form of transportation. There's fast boarding, no delays and hassles, no downtime. You can use your phone or your laptop the entire stretch. You can purchase tickets on short notice. You can change plans. You can make it's shorter total trip time. You don't always have to have hotels and all this time to get to a city and to get there hours ahead, because you can't count on the airlines to get you on time. And then there's also direct connections to downtowns and also connections to smaller cities, because the train stops several places along the way, so you don't have to do 2 or 3 planes to get somewhere. And then in general, the assisted productivity, trains can move just enormous numbers of people. For example, subway can carry 60 to 80,000 people per hour per track, whereas a highway to 2,400 people per lane, which is actually, when it's congested, that number is even lower. So in terms of our being able to move around the country quickly and easily, it's getting more and more difficult, and those situations are actually getting worse. So kind of to conclude, we always look at we need to really look at big picture, 3 major solutions to solve all these problems. And it's a major scale up of renewable energy, a major scale up of electric train transportation, and then to go with those, a major scale up of walkable cities, kind of like what's right outside the door here, that you can actually live without a car and get to your places where you want to go. So we need all 3 of these to get to real sustainability and get past these situations that we're in. And then in the rail sector itself, there's a 3-tiered system there. And we're focused on the high-speed system in the nation, but then we also need metros and local systems, in the regional systems to connect to it. And then at the very local scale, trams and streetcars riding around the cities. And then the final one would be a much greater use of bicycles and walking. And when you put all that together, you literally take oil and fossil fuels out of the picture and efficient movement for everybody. So then this is my last part, a global transformation that we actually have to do, and we're sort of on the verge of heading this way now. So we have to transform the nation from everybody being stuck to moving quickly, transform the regions, kind of the same situation. This is all over America, nearly all day long, everywhere, even on the weekends, into fast trains. And then transforming the neighborhoods, once again, still backed up everywhere, barely moving, into you get cars out of the city, you make walkable and trams and bicycles. There's many examples of this in Europe that it does work. And then transforming the people from everybody just being wound up and stressed into relaxed. You've got a girlfriend now, you can spend time with her instead of like being stuck in his car. And then also we have to remember we need to, these are just quickly what sustainable, energy efficient transportation looks like on different scales. There's the tram systems in several cities, and then an often forgotten form of transportation is actually walking. And so if you have cities that are well built, you can walk and you don't need to be using all these cars and all this energy. So the final thing is most of our industries and businesses actually are entrenched in producing the things that we need to phase out of. So we started looking at, and many of these things are already happening. What can we do with these companies? Because we don't want to try to fight them and shut them down. We want them to retool and start building the things that we need and stop building the things that we don't need. So for example, airplane manufacturing could convert to wind turbine manufacturing, very similar. Car manufacturing could convert to train manufacturing, and then defense industry, and this is already happening, can convert from making weapons to making renewable energy, solar power. And then car parts manufacturing could convert to making bicycles, for example. And then the last 2, road builders, and we're already seeing interest in this, they can build rail infrastructure just like they can build road infrastructure. It's pretty much the same thing, it's just narrower. And then sprawl developers can start building more cities. And many of these, like I said, are already happening. And so what we like to do as an association is sort of help put it all together and step on the accelerator, because we feel that there's actually a limited time before we really get into some serious energy crises and a situation where there may be shortages. And so we want to kind of get out from under this mess before it really takes us down. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Pass these around, it's a little more information, and it has our map in there that you're welcome to have a look at. There's time for questions, or we're about right on.
Maybe if we have some time.
Okay.
Questions? Can I ask a question? Do you have a fixation on people, or is high-speed rail not suitable for freight?
Well, actually, high-speed trains, they can move lightweight freight. You could convert, because right now you send a FedEx package, it's going on a truck, on an airplane, another truck. That all could be switched and put on efficient electric trains. In fact, in France, they move all the mail on trains, high-speed trains. You can move all the parcels, all the produce, flowers, all the perishables, even small things, shipments, electronics from Walmart. Much of that could be converted to these kinds of trains and share the same track. They can do it at night. What you're not going to mix is you're not going to be carrying like chemicals and tons of coal and lumber. We already have a great freight rail system for that. We have the best in the world, partly because there's no passengers, trying to take up the track. So there is a big push to actually use these same trains and the same system, same investment for freight as well. So you could run these trains at night, an entire freight network on the same investment in the tracks, and in the daytime it's all passengers. Or you could even slip a few trains in between. Like you have maybe there's passenger trains every 10 minutes. Well, in between those, every 5 minutes could be a freight train. But what they do in France is they actually used one of their high-speed trains, or some of their older ones, took out all the seats and just turned it into a cargo carrier. So it fits right on the same system, merges in there, works completely compatible with the passenger system. So that makes the investment more valuable that way too. And so, if we have an energy crisis, and everybody's worried about, the first thing that's going to hit us is food is not going to make it to the grocery stores. And most grocery stores maybe only have a 3-day supply of food. So that would immediately trigger a crisis of people rioting and things like what's happened in New Orleans after the hurricane. And so with renewable energy powered electric trains, we can continue moving food forever. You just have to also retool the food system because it uses a lot of fossil fuels. Yeah.
So have you looked at somebody, you or somebody else has done analysis on if you just got rid of the interstate and put all rail there, what would be the emission reduction?
It would cut our energy by 2/3. As you got it built up.
Right.
And that is a good place. We are advocating for using the interstate highways, not necessarily in the lanes themselves, but in the medians or the shoulders. And the curvature is slightly different. They need wider curves. So if the highway road snakes too much, the rail system can just go up in the air and kind of over it and then come back down. So it's that's an investment that we've already made, and we can reuse it and not have to completely start from scratch and build all over.
So what would be the impact on the cost if you did that?
It would probably cut the cost by at least 1/3. I mean, you'll have to rebuild some of the highways to make it work, and move overpasses out of the way, and straighten out some things, move some lanes. But it's probably the quickest feasible way to do it, rather than trying to fight with the freight companies or try to buy all new stuff.
And so one more question. So if the technology for high-speed rail, is that technology benefits the rail system, the regional and the local? Is that the same technology, or you just have to create a completely new technology infrastructure?
Well, there's a lot of, when you get near stations and near cities, you can share on existing track. That's the beauty of these systems. It's not like the maglev, which is completely different. It all has to be built from scratch. So you would use existing tracks when you get into the station, but as soon as you get outside the city, that's all new track and you go full speed. So it's very compatible. And what will happen is you can move some of the people out of the slower Amtrak trains and put them on these new systems, and then that actually frees up more space in those systems because there's already a lot of bottlenecks the whole Northeast corridor. It's literally almost maxed out now.
I just want to ask.
Okay. Sorry, he's already 8 minutes
I'm sorry.
into his 30 minutes.
I don't want to disrespect.
Alrighty. Our next presentation is by William Halal from George Washington University, presenting on tracking the technology revolution, highlights from the TechCast project.
Great, thank you so much. I have handouts. I bought 30. And, okay. No, well, that's all you, that's more than you need. Okay, I want to tell you about a little project I've been working on for a long time. I call it TechCast project, and we forecast the breakthroughs in all fields of technology. We track the technology revolution. This is my latest book. I have a few copies of this that I can give you at the author's discount. But what I want to do is tell you a little bit about the method, and then just a few highlights of the results. And we'll talk about one of the big critical issues that we
Oh,
let's see if I understand that. A little bit about one of the big issues that we studied as a result. We look at issues that cut across all the technologies. And then we aggregate all our data to produce macro forecasts, which I think is interesting. And then that's enough. Okay. And I invite you to offer quick questions as we go on. This is what we do. The best way to see this is we reduce uncertainty. Think of the level of knowledge in this room as 100% uncertainty. And we have editors, they scan everything they can find and get all this background information. Then we aggregate that into a background information for each technology. And that reduces uncertainty by 30 to 40%, I think. When you just look at those, you'll see that it clarifies what's going on with that technology. But there is always uncertainty. There is always uncertainty. The background information is ambiguous and so forth. And that's what the role of the experts is. They resolve the remaining. I don't understand why this thing is not showing up. Oh, it's just so small. Yeah, they reduce the remaining uncertainty. The experts look at all this information and they enter estimates. The system crunches the numbers and the forecasts are updated in real time. And so that reduces uncertainty by another 30 to 40%. And the result, I think, is about 30% remaining uncertainty. We validate these results. We go back. We monitor the technologies that arrive, the forecasts that arrive, and we compare that with the forecasts that were made 10, 15 years ago. And we can see how accurate all this is. We find that it's about plus or minus 3 years error band, about 10 years out. I think that's pretty good. That's good enough to get decision makers into the right ballpark. And this is what the data looks like. You see, it's very simple here. You have, oh, this is messed up. A number of, forget about that. And we display all of the data frequency distributions here so that the three variables that we forecast, the most likely year the technology will arrive, market size, and confidence. So it's all transparent. This is a summary of the data, organized into 7 fields: energy, environment, and so forth. This is the most likely year these technologies will arrive. And the main thing you learn here is that there are breakthroughs everywhere. This is going to change the world over the next 10 or 20 years, I think. And this is what we've accomplished over the last few years. We've been working on this. It amazes me. I didn't know we could achieve this. I'd like to ask, why is this happening now? We've had other technology revolutions, radio, trades, and all that. What's different, I think, is the role of knowledge. Now we have the majority of people in modern societies are knowledge workers, and the information technology increases our knowledge. It does more than process transactions. These powerful information systems allow us to gather knowledge very rapidly, very powerful knowledge. And the knowledge in turn increases the rate of innovation, which improves the IT systems. And so this virtuous cycle of knowledge is going on, which is unprecedented. This has never happened in the world before. And that's why we're seeing these remarkable breakthroughs everywhere and the revolution. These are the things that we have to focus on: knowledge, IT, and innovation. Here's one way to present the data in bubble charts. It presents all 3 variables: the most likely year, it's off the scale here, most likely year, the confidence of the experts, and the market. The bubble reflects the potential size of the market. And I just call your attention to a few things that stand out here. The big bubbles with high confidence and imminent are the ones that we want to pay attention to: green business, climate change, and alternative energy. These are going to be big developments in energy, and they're not that far off. I think this, we've got 130 experts doing this. When you pull the knowledge of that number of people and give them all of this background information, you have something very, very effective, I think. And I think there's high confidence that these things are going to work out. I think we're going to solve these energy problems in the next 10 or 12 years. Any questions, comments? Here's the alternative energy. This is just a quick summary of some of the background information. A couple of things are interesting here. That the growth rates run about 30 to 50% per year, which is roughly comparable to Moore's law. And so I think we're going to see the same acceleration of alternative energies that we saw in information technology over the last 30 or 40 years. And here's our forecast. Right now, 17% of the world's energy comes from alternative sources. We think that will reach 30%. 30% is a target adoption level we try to focus on, because that's when technologies enter the mainstream. They take off at that point. And we think that's going to happen in like 10 years. Serious first beginning of a new regime of alternative energy. Here's IT. And again, I just call your attention to a few things. Smartphones have arrived. It's here now. 30% of smartphones, mobile phones are smartphones, roughly speaking. And we will now take that arrival date and we'll go back to our older forecasts and use that to validate the results. And also, I want to call your attention to these advanced IT technologies out here. Virtual reality, optical computing, AI, thought power, quantum computing, and biocomputing. I think of that as second generation IT. In about 10 years, we're going to see these far more powerful technologies enter mainstream use. It's going to change the world. Here's a little of our background information on AI. The time has come for all this stuff. Siri is, I think, a great example of where we're going. And I think you're going to see intelligent devices appearing to solve all kinds of different problems, like GPS navigation systems, for instance, another one. And you can see a lot of these individual little AI systems appear to solve all of these tasks that people fuss with, spend an awful lot of time working on, and collectively that will form general AI. But we don't try and focus general AI, that's much too ambitious. We focus on what could be called weak AI, AI that replaces routine mental tasks. That's going to happen in about 10 years. In about 10 years. We study the practices of organizations in adopting new technologies. This is what we've learned. We've got a really nice article just came out, Business Strategies for the Technology Revolution. And here's the critical issues we studied. This is the most powerful one, I think. The critical issues that cut across the technologies. I call it the global mega crisis. Colleague and I have been doing this for a few years now. We just survey the trends going on out there, and here are the trends that are driving the mega crisis, the negative trends, and there's really more than that. There's about 15 of these we found, and the trends resolving it, there's very few trends resolving it. But some things that we hear a lot about, the climate change, the extreme weather, methane and so forth, industrialization. The whole world is industrializing. Global GDP is going to double in about 15 years. All of these problems are going to increase by that correspondingly, I think, in about 10 or 15 years. No political will for solving a lot of these problems, water and so forth. The world has reached, I think, a very critical point in its development. If this stuff is not addressed, it's hard for me to imagine how life is going to go on. Let me show you the next slide, which is interesting. We do a survey on this on the site, and we use 4 scenarios run from the most pessimistic to the most optimistic. It's a very small sample, but it gives you a rough sense of what the people think. They assign a 25% probability to the worst scenario. What people think on average, and these are intelligent people, that there's a 25% probability we will see the loss of civilization in major parts of the world. And ordinary people understand this. You can talk to ordinary people and mention the word global mega crisis, and they say, oh yeah. They all know that the situation is dire, and they do not see a way out. The politicians and the corporations are not really addressing these things. So people do not see a way, they do not see a future for the world unless something really big changes, I think. And collectively, the two worst scenarios, this one would be pretty bad. 60% probability. That would be two worst scenarios. Any questions, comments? Here we aggregate these forecasts and see, so here, it's the same bubble chart, most likely year at the bottom, experts' confidence size of the bubbles is market size. It's all color-coded, as you noticed. And I like to use this to look for patterns. If you look at the patterns here, I think you get a good sense of what's going to happen in the world as a whole. And technology is a very powerful indicator because technology is foundational. It drives all change, economic change, and social change, and so forth. So I think it's very a good indicator. And I'd like to focus here on the beginning of this decade, 2015. And what you see here is mostly yellow and orange bubbles. Yellow is IT and orange is e-commerce. So those informational technologies are going to dominate the next decade or so. You can just see that happening right now. The new devices and capabilities that keep coming out every year or two. And that's going to keep going on. And it's exploding around the world. All of the developing countries are adopting this stuff as rapidly as we are. So I think of that as the world online in this decade. I'll say a little more about it in a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. And then the decade of 2020 is when the more advanced technologies arrive, the purple and green and blue bubbles, which are medicine, biogenetics, the big alternative energy developments, transportation, all that. The really tough things. That's going to happen, I think, in the next decade. So let me look at those scenarios just a little bit. The world online, here's what's coming along. See, all of the IT. E-commerce, I think, is going to take off. We do a lot of e-commerce now, but it's nowhere near the 30% adoption level. For instance, e-tailing. E-tailing only comprises about 10% of all retail sales. If it reaches 30% adoption level, that's going to be different. That's going to really change the way the economy works. And then here are these other things that are happening. The global brain, half the world will be on the internet in about 5 years. Right now, you've got 5 billion mobile phones used in the world. That's almost half the world right there. And they're all going to become smartphones in just a few years. And then this suggests that the Great Recession, the global recession, we think, is going to end in a few years, about 2015. We think we're going to see the beginning of the next economic upcycle. Yes. Were you going to say something?
No, I just found it intriguing.
Yeah. And here's the 2020 scenario. We think this problem of sustainability is likely to be resolved in a decade or so. All of those tough problems, I think, are going to be brought under control. Marine transportation and the advanced medical technologies are just remarkable, the things that are coming along. Mastery over life. Just as we gain control, we gained mastery over the physical world during the last 100 years, nuclear energy, space travel, all of that. The same thing is going to happen to the biological world. Almost anything that conceivable, I think, is going to be capable of doing that. And then here's where it really gets interesting. Infinite knowledge and intelligence, the second generation IT, all of that stuff. And I think that is just a remarkable development because it means that the focus of human attention shifts. When routine knowledge work is automated, then what do people do? See, that's a big concern for scientists and industrialists today. We've always been automating work. We first automated agriculture and then manufacturing work, and now we're automating services. And then when we automate knowledge work, what will people do? See? I think we can tell what's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to move beyond knowledge to address the mega crisis out of necessity, which is the way these things always happen. Big change occurs out of necessity because we're forced to do it. And that's going to require restructuring institutions and society. Now, I feel so confident in that I think this is the next great frontier beyond knowledge. We all know about knowledge now. But knowledge is limited in what it can do. The best example I know of is our Congress. They've got available to them the best knowledge in the world. Why can't they get anything done? Because it's got nothing to do with rationality or knowledge. It's because they have these two ideological belief systems that are opposed to one another, and they can't find a resolution to those beliefs. Those die-hard, really almost zealots about these belief systems. And I think that is the great challenge that the world is struggling with now. All of these outmoded belief systems and values and visions and principles that we inherited from the industrial past. And that has to change. They do not accord with the modern world. And so that is, I think, the next great frontier, consciousness. And this is the issue that scientists are concerned about today. What is consciousness? Consciousness has emerged as one of the biggest conundrums of our time. That's where I think the scientific interest is, and the practical interest. If we want to survive this, in a nutshell, the world has to grow up. We can't behave the way we did in the past. Just like the way if you've raised children, you know that they act crazy in their teens, and at some point they finally realize that they can't go on behaving that way, and they assume responsibility for their behavior, and they use their capabilities, and they start acting reasonable. And that's really, I think, where the world is today. And then that will allow, I think, the restructuring of institutions, because the way we experience all of this is today's institutions do not work. The free market system in this country has suffered crises that are historic. The 2000 dot-com bust, the 2008 financial collapse, the disappearance of the middle class, trickle-down economics doesn't work. All the money is up there at the top of the pyramid. So I think institutions have to change. Government, all institutions. I'm a Catholic. The Catholic Church is in profound crisis. Average Catholics do not believe that the bishops have legitimacy. They think they are, corrupt. They're doing crazy things without regard for what makes any sense. So this is, I think, another of the big challenges that the world faces. And a little bit about the method. This is collective intelligence. That's what we've done here. I think a very powerful methodology that could be used in all institutions, because most organizations do not know much about the knowledge residing within their membership. And if you could harness that knowledge within your organization, you would have a very powerful tool for collective understanding and better decisions. And finally, this has been a big success, I think. It's one of the most important things that I've done in my life. I've done a lot of things. I was an aerospace engineer, Air Force officer that worked in Silicon Valley before I became an academic. And this is just a great project. So we're continuing to work on it. We're going to expand it now to include social trends and wildcards, which will then allow us to cover the entire organizational environment that will comprise everything that a strategy policymakers should be thinking about. And then we're going to expand on our tools on the site to allow decision makers, planners, to take all of that information, all of those forecasts, including the social trends and wildcards, and put it into a strategic planning process so they can do their strategic planning online. In effect, we're going to try and automate the strategic planning process, kind of the way, it's kind of like like word processing for strategy, do the hard work, or the routine work. The decision makers still have to do the strategic thinking, of course. That's obviously the essence of it. But the system, I think, will make this more easy for them to accomplish. And we've just hired a new president. So that's my presentation. I have a few minutes if you want to ask questions.
Let's take questions for about 3 minutes.
Good. Yes, please.
On your slide, I think it's or some of all the slides that you had projection of the year of realization versus the expert's opinion.
Right.
I guess on most of those, I noticed a trend for increasing
Decrease in confidence, yes.
Right.
That's right.
I was wondering, is there a, I guess that's the end point that you've shown in summary data, but clearly there would be a trajectory of investment towards that end point.
Oh, you mean how does the technology actually evolve?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious if you, in effect, normalize for the effect of, the forecasted, the amount that is forecasted. So
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding.
So in that trend is that the further away it is,
there's less
the
confidence.
less confident it is. So is there a way to normalize for that?
No, it's just an indicator of, it's just you can see that the normal decrease in confidence as the technologies are further out in the future, which is normal. Right. It's just an indicator of how much faith a decision maker could put in an individual. Right. Like some of these forecasts, like life extension. The life extension forecast, if I showed you that bubble chart, you'd see that it stands out of the trend. It's high in confidence. It's very telling. It shows that our experts have high confidence that life extension is going to work out. Younger people today, the younger people in this room, will live to be 100 years on average, or maybe more. I think that's almost certain.
But I think that's what I was curious about. Is there a way to back out that normal trend so that you would see those things that
Maybe you and I can talk about that a little more. Yes, please.
Yeah, both presentations to me illustrate that we're really at a point of crisis.
That's right.
And we can either devolve or either we can just have a renaissance period. Now that we have this knowledge, I'd like strategies from either one of you. You're accountable once you know something. What can I do as an individual to help maybe move the political will?
Yeah. My feeling is the best thing we could all do is just understand this. I don't think this is understood. I think there's enormous confusion out there and a lot of misinformation. If people understood that the United States and the world as a whole is poised at a very critical point in its evolution. It's either mature or die. It's basically that simple. And if we understood that and understood what we could do to get out of it, I think change would come. But most people do not understand that.
Well, the problem is most of the media doesn't even go into any of this stuff, or it's all just a lot of it's corporate controlled, and people do not have. But the good thing is the internet. You can find anything you want. It's all there. But
it's bewildering.
You have to go find it.
There's too much of it. You don't know how to make sense out of it. Yeah. What we try to do is keep it really focused. Really focused.
And I think the way the media portrays it, they just portray the two political sides and always treat them as equals.
Yeah. Well, the one example is that they hold up what we call, the think tank, a denialist, as if he has equal value to the higher scientific community.
That's right.
So it's a either or. You have a choice. Which guy do you believe?
That's right. This is a very critical time in the history of the world, I think. Very critical.
So we could either end up in wars and destroying the planet, or we could get moving and fix everything and have a great future.
That's exactly it. I think that's exactly, and what he described is part of that. Good transportation, renewable transportation systems. This is just a little more broadly conceived. That's right. I think these presentations are For
I think you got it pretty good.
Did you plan it this way?
I didn't plan anything. They just asked me to show up here.
So the trends in, you know, if you look at the numbers in poverty, in terms of the number of people who are killed in a war, those trends are pointing to a world that is more secure, more fair, etc., etc. What you're suggesting here, that trend, if you believe that trend,
What trend? I'm sorry?
that this is the most, in terms of wars, this is the most peaceful time in human history, or in recent human history.
In contrast to a lot of crazy
Right.
things.
Right, and because that's what the trends are.
Yeah, I
Right,
think that's true.
contrast.
I think that's true.
And the, you know, we know that for the past 60 years, there has been a decrease in poverty. We're pretty sure of that number as well.
Globalization.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, British also globalized the world, right? They conquered every part of the world, but it didn't improve a lot of people.
Right.
So if you believe those trends over the past 60 years, then what you're suggesting is that it's going to turn for the worse.
No, it's bad now. There are these good trends, you're right. Global poverty, I think, is decreasing and other things, but at the cost of these enormous, this mega crisis.
Right, so for example, if climate change...
The cost is climate change and shortages of water that are coming, and cyber warfare. Oh my God. Look, I can send you this article. It's very depressing to see the negative trends that are at work.
Right,
and the lack of political will.
Yes.
And people can't do anything.
You're absolutely right, but you know, if you look at the past political way, past politicians, I mean, somebody in the U.S. history took a gun out and shot the guy in the Senate chambers. You know, I mean, you have to compare human societies are not. I'm a scientist, so you know, human societies are not scientific information, right? Human societies have a way of resolving their disputes. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. What I'm trying to understand, honestly, I don't have a dog in this fight here. I'm trying to understand is that what you're suggesting is that these crises, these mega crises, are going to result in a world that, from here on, a world that is more poorer, has greater amount of conflict than we currently have.
I think so. If you have serious climate change, it'll devastate societies. It'll devastate societies. You have shortage of water, cyber warfare, all of these horrible things that there are no solutions to. Maybe because we're not addressing them. Yes, please.
I have to be the mean chair. Cut you off. They're supposed to start here in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to make sure they have time to set
Yeah,
something up.
sure.
But I'm sure some of you, I'm sure they'll take some questions afterwards.
Sure. Yes.